Surveyors and Landscape Architects meeting. We're gonna play a short video to start. Johnny,
Okay.
thank you.
Welcome to the Professional and Vocational Licensing Virtual Board Meeting. When the meeting begins momentarily, the chair will take a roll call, explain any specific rules for this particular board, and then move to public comment. The name of the board member will appear on the bottom left-hand corner of your screen. For instance, this is board member Y, and this is board member E. Public testimony will be accepted at the beginning of the meeting and before each agenda item. You can indicate that you are ready to testify by clicking on the raise hand button being circled by the mouse on your screen now. At the appropriate time, the board will recognize you to speak and ask you to unmute your mic as shown here. Again, public testimony will be accepted at the beginning of the meeting and before each agenda item. Public attendees will not be able to unmute their microphone until recognized by the board. Public attendees who are recognized to testify will be asked to identify themselves by name and their affiliated organization if applicable. Please mute your microphone when you are finished speaking as a courtesy to others and members of the board. Public attendees will not be able to unmute themselves after the testimony is completed unless recognized again after raising their hand. At some point during the meeting, the board may choose to move into executive session. When the board moves into executive session, the board members' microphones and video feeds will be turned off, and a similar screen as you see now will be displayed. When the board returns from executive session, their microphones will be turned on as well as their video cameras. Welcome again to the Professional and Vocational Licensing Virtual Board Meeting. At this time, the chair will call the meeting to order and take a roll call, as well as explain any additional rules that may be specific to this board.
Thank you, Johnny. Because this is a hybrid meeting, the Vice Chair, Mr. Tony Lau, will read some additional rules for internet access.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. To view the meeting and provide live oral testimony, please use the link at the top of the agenda. You will be asked to enter your name. The board requests that you enter your full name, but you may use a pseudonym or other identifier if you wish to remain anonymous. You will also be asked for an email address. Your microphone will be automatically muted. When the chairperson asks for public testimony, you may click the raise hand button found on your Zoom screen to indicate that you wish to testify about that agenda item. The chairperson will individually enable each testifier to unmute their microphone. When recognized by the chairperson, please unmute your microphone before speaking and mute your microphone after you finish speaking. Upon request, your Zoom video or similar on-camera option will be enabled to allow you to be visible to the board members and other meeting participants while presenting oral testimony. Please turn off your camera after you conclude your testimony. It is the individual testifier's responsibility to ensure they have the video and internet capabilities to successfully stream or remotely testify. The board maintains the authority to remove and block individuals who willfully disrupt or compromise the conduct of the meeting. If you cannot get internet access, you may get audio-only access by calling the phone number listed at the top of the agenda. Upon dialing the number, you will be prompted to enter the meeting ID, which is also listed at the top of the agenda. After entering the meeting ID, you will be asked to either enter your panelist number or wait to be admitted into the meeting. You will not have a panelist number, so please wait until you are admitted into the meeting. When the chairperson asks for public testimony, you may indicate you want to testify by entering star and then 9 on your phone's keypad. After entering star and then 9, a voice prompt will let you know that the host of the meeting has been notified. When recognized by the chairperson, You may unmute yourself by pressing star and then 6 on your phone. A voice prompt will let you know that you are unmuted. Once you are finished speaking, please enter star and then 6 again to mute your phone. For both internet and phone access, when testifying, you will be asked to identify yourself and the organization, if any, that you represent. Each testifier will be limited to 5 minutes of testimony per agenda item. If connection to the meeting is lost for more than 30 minutes, the meeting will be continued on a specified date and time. This information will be provided on the board's website. Instructions to attend State of Hawaii virtual board meetings may be found online at the board's website.
Thank you, Mr. Lau. Moving to agenda item number 1. I'm going to take a roll call to establish quorum. Nancy Cassandro.
Here.
Brian Fujiwara.
Here.
Dan Hirota.
Here.
Ali Nanaba.
Here.
Jay Shibashi.
Here.
Kevin Katayama here. Joe Kurokawa.
Here.
Tony Lau.
Here.
Jonathan Lucas.
Here.
Ethan Pang.
Here.
Janet Primiano. She'll be arriving late to this meeting. Roberto Yumo.
Here.
Howard Lau and John Takitani are excused. Seeing we have a quorum, call the meeting to order at 10:07 a.m. Agenda item number 2, approval of the open session and executive session minutes of the December 12th, 2024 meeting. Johnny, are there any public comments or anybody waiting to make comments on this item?
Thank you, Chair. We do not have anyone requesting to provide testimony.
Okay, are there any board comments or discussions on the meeting minutes? Motion to approve the open session and executive session meeting minutes.
Who moved?
Alan and Alba moved. Any second?
Second. Go ahead.
Brian,
John, good second.
all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Ayes, recusals, or abstentions? Seeing none, motion carries. Agenda item number 3, new business. I guess we have a couple of guests here. Mr. Hugh Ono from the director, who's the director of the County of Hawaii Department of Public Works regarding stamp approvals on building permits.
So welcome, Director Ono. If you can have a seat at the
Okay,
that seat.
thank you very
Just
much.
introduce yourself again to the board, and a reminder, you have 5 minutes for oral testimony, and then the board has questions.
Okay, well, what we have is, am I on the agenda or is this testimony? Well,
Agenda?
anyway, what I have is not gonna take very long. Not here to complain, here to offer information. First of all, I want to thank each and every one of you for what you do with the Board of Engineers, Architects, Land Surveyors, and Landscape Architects. And I've worked with many of you across over the years, and I have many, many years. But first of all, let me introduce Juvan Sunamura. She heads our building division, and within her division, they do building permits, they do building engineering for the entire county. We also do repair and maintenance for the entire county of Hawaii. So she has a handful of things to do. She operates pretty much like a department of her own, but she happens to be within the Department of Public Works. A little bit about myself. I have been a professional engineer for 57 years. That makes me 62 years old. I wish. But I'm a graduate of the University of Hawaii. I'm proud to be an engineer and a graduate of the University of Hawaii. I have known quite a few members on this board. The most influential in my career, in my life, is George Nishimura. I'm not sure if you know of him, but he's the one that got me involved in the NCWS, the National Council of Examiners for Engineers and Surveyors. So I was with that organization for about 25 years, served as the national chair after George. for the Civil Engineering Exam Committee, and was a wonderful experience. So with that, let me go into what I have to say. First of all, the problem that we're having is, and again, I'm not complaining, is we're challenged with our building permit approval process. Annually, we receive about 5,000 to 6,000 permits a year. And what we've become is a review agency, but we've also become an agency that corrects plans. So when we correct the plans, we're actually doing something that the people who prepare these plans should be doing. So they're not up to date with the codes. We have certain individuals just plan stamping, and that service is needed, undeniably. Someone needs to stamp these plans because it's a requirement of the statutes of Hawaii. But in many cases, these plans do not meet the test of completeness. So when that happens, we become a reviewing agency, a peer review agency, design review. So what we have to do is we indicate what they all are. It's taking us extraordinary time. And then we return it to the applicant. The applicant has to work with their design professional to make the corrections. And sometimes, Julianne, how long are some of the delays?
6 months to a year sometimes.
6 months to a year, so it's back with the design professional. And then we get it back and then we review it again. By that time, it's probably okay. Okay, but because we have that, it shows up in our time as extraordinary time for a plan approval. So what I want to do and Julianne want to do is improve the process. So I'm just notifying this board that we'll be working with the engineers and architects and the drafting people to improve the quality of their plans. And, that'll help us a great deal. We can sure speed up the process. Everybody wants their building permits. Nobody says, take your time, So that just doesn't happen in our world. So we're working on it very hard. We're going to improve it without question. We're going to update our website so all the information is on there. And Julianne is an excellent manager. So I'm lucky to have her with me. I think that's all I have. That's basically it. So I welcome any questions you may have. Otherwise, I'll sit down and shut up.
I actually have a question that, how are you probably gonna implement, getting the word out? Do you have like a checklist of,
We
items
have
that-
checklists. They're not posted online or any place. We need to include that in some kind of information website or someplace where we can get the word out. We also want to do informational meetings with the people who prepare these plans. Our mayor is willing to step in and do a public information program on that too. But we won't work in a silo on this. We'll work with the industry. We have an engineering society on the Big Island, and we probably have an architectural society on the Big Island too. So we'll work with them, but we're willing to do that.
Okay, any other questions for?
So do you think that the counties need additional help in their public outreach so that, like you say, updating the website? We see this across the board of the permitting process. Perhaps the counties need some help in their website for the permitting process.
We always need help. In fact, any of you want to come work with us? I have a job for you. We have 427 people on our staff with 127 vacancies. That's 37%, 33%. But yeah, we're gonna, I think we can do it internally, but I'm not shy about going outside, getting help from the private sector to help us put that together. What help?
I'm not qualified.
Director Ono, we appreciate the work that you both do and your all of your teams. Because I know that you're also part of the health, safety, and welfare infrastructure, just like the board. And yeah, if you can keep the board in the loop on as you start to implement those plans for educating the
I'd
public.
be
and
happy
everything.
to.
Yeah, we'd be.
The more people that know, the better. So we try and be transparent, not really, but no, we do. So you just have to give me whom I can give the information. Would it be you?
Yes, it would be.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, so I'll need to make sure I have your email address and your phone number, certainly.
Yes.
Because we want everybody to know what we're doing. We don't want to be a secret.
Yeah, that would be great. And then I can help disseminate it to the board members.
Nobody wants a job? Ellen, you looking for a job?
And then on the issue of plan stamping specifically, I know that you folks have so much work, but in reporting it, if there can be a staff member or someone who can start reporting it to RICO. Unfortunately, the board doesn't have investigative authority. But if you are seeing that, you know, in our laws and rules, there are things about misconduct in the practice being plan stamping. And so RICO can start investigating if you see repeat offenders, especially, that would be great to kind of start the process. And then once they investigate, if they find that there's cause, then they would refer it to the board for action against the licensee as warranted.
It's a kind of difficult area because they
know.
are providing a service. You know, because there are numerous engineers or architects that don't want to stamp those plans. But you know, we look for the quality to step up and so if you stamp them, you should be compensated for that.
And they should be
accordingly,
reviewing.
you know, but I will let you know. We have some.
I'd like to mention something, if I may. You mentioned the building department.
Yes.
But from my side, from the surveying side, I've seen construction plans come to me from a contractor that the civil needs to be kind of stepped up too.
Okay,
The civil
that would be on our
design.
engineering division side.
Yeah,
Thank you, Alan. Okay, hi, Paul.
Okay,
Thank you so much.
Follow
for
very
joining
much,
us.
okay,
Glad
very
you
much
could be with us in
appreciated.
Houston. Thank you. And you're welcome to stay and join the rest of the board meeting.
We have lots of meetings.
I'm sure. Thank you.
thank you. Okay, moving on to agenda item number 3B. Query from John Ritchie, Hawaii licensed structural engineer. Regarding overlap practice of licensed architects and structural engineers in the county of Maui.
I understand we have Mr. Ritchie on the call with us today, so if Johnny, if we can, oh, thank you, Director. If we can promote Mr. Ritchie to panelist, but just for the board's information. So the board did receive email correspondence from Mr. Ritchie regarding licensed practice issues observed on Maui and Maui County. So in an email, we emailed a letter dated December 17, 2024. And I won't read the letter in its entirety, and Mr. Ritchie, you're welcome to highlight different areas of your letter in your testimony. But towards the end, he does note that the question is, why is a licensed architect allowed to practice structural engineering for buildings that are required to be designed by the International Building Code without the same experience and credentials as a licensed structural engineer? Typically, they have neither the education, experience, and qualification. So that's kind of the context for this agenda item. And then I'll let Mr. Ritchie clarify and add. In your board packets is that letter that I mentioned that Mr. Ritchie wrote addressing the board, as well as some notes and designs that he may reference in his testimony as well. My understanding is that he's been tracking the issue that he will be discussing for some time now, speaking to various government officials, and other stakeholders. And now he's bringing this matter before the board. So thank you, Mr. Ritchie, for joining us. If you can just introduce yourself, and then a reminder, you have a maximum of 5 minutes for oral testimony, and then the board can engage in questions to follow. Thank you.
Okay, yeah, thank you for your guys' time today. My name's John Ritchie. I live in Maui, Hawaii. Have an office, John Ritchie, Structural Engineer LLC. I'm a sole proprietor. In summary, we're seeing an epidemic, which has been prevalent, or pre-existing prior to this 4-leaf coming in to assist with Lahaina. but we're seeing an epidemic of buildings that are being stamped by licensed professionals in the state of Hawaii that are non-code conforming, and those professionals are practicing in areas in which they do not have expertise, i.e. incompetent. I myself have seen these drawings. Some consultants I've spoke to have also seen it, as well as contractors out in the field. And, and so, yeah, the main question, I mean, I understand architects can, do IRC, but they do not have the level of capacity, to my understanding, or to be practicing IBC level designs. I mean, I had to, get SE2 licensure, and these architects do not have that. But albeit they are still signing and sealing drawings that would require a licensed structural engineer to do the work. Yeah, I have spoken to the mayor's office, governor's liaisons. Currently here on Maui, DSA is making, Jordan Molina. I'm assisting them with providing a structural plan check. I don't know how it's gonna pan out. But the concern is, you guys rely on us to report these people. However, as individuals, we're not privy to their activities and where their stamps are going. So it all kind of bottlenecks in the permitting portion. But there's there's just very strong concern where, in the modern era, especially after 94 or Northridge, and what lessons learned from that, and subsequent disasters, and codes have been revised as such, only to be back at the baseline prior to those, where we have non-competent professionals signing and sealing things. And the owners are not privy to what the deliverables should be. And these people are selling themselves as competent, which is, fraudulent. I submitted some of those drawings. It's really sad to get these calls from these people because they're professional, cannot perform the necessary calculations as requested by 4-Leaf. And those are just minimums. But 4-Leaf is expanding their review to include, because I was involved with one project for, as I submitted the Chris Woodfin residence, and that gentleman, in review of his plans while we were in conversation, there's like 80 comments of not only like, just missing general notes and sections and details, but there are actually members within the building that do not pass design criteria. There's one project that I submitted at the ladder, was a post and pier, no lateral force resisting system at the post and pier level, and beams were 60% overstressed. And right now we don't have a peer review biostructural in the county, and the people reviewing it, well, right now they don't review it, but 4-Leaf doesn't even check it as well, under the direction of the county of Maui. They've been told to restrict their review. DSA is instructed them as such.
Mr. Ritchie, sorry to interrupt, but if you could wrap up your testimony, and then the
Yeah.
board can also ask.
It's in summary, it's basically, in concert with Mr. Ono. I have the same concerns over here. We got a problem.
Thank you. Are there any other public comments?
Thank you, Chair. We do not have anyone requesting to provide testimony.
Okay, are there any more questions or comments for Mr. Ritchie?
I just wanted to clarify, so Maui County right now allows architects to stamp structural engineering drawings? I just wanted to clarify, is that the case?
I mean, yes, the current Maui County Ordinance 5507, I think it's section 103, states simply that they do not do a structural review. And what is required is stamped drawings that are created via prescriptive code or engineered by an engineer, or not an engineer specifically, but or just engineered. It says it's kind of broad language. And so
So is it
they do
usually,
stamp, and so because of time and lack of knowledgeable reviewers, basically they're instructed if they see the stamp, they just turn the pages. And it goes out that way. I always joke I could draw a smiley face on the plans and stamp it and they wouldn't even catch it.
Okay.
Fortunately.
Thank you.
And a reminder to board members when we, just because the meeting's hybrid today, if you could say your name before so everyone knows who's speaking. Thank you. No, thanks.
So I have a question. This is Brian Fujiwara. I'm an architect member. How are you I guess like a third-party reviewer, or how did you come about reviewing some of these plans?
Those plans came to me through one that the post and pier came from Jeremy Stoddard with Peely Design. He just submitted a testimony via email to Sheena. I doubt you guys have that. And then the other two projects that I saw were I was approached by those owners because they needed because one, the Woodfin 4-leaf had requirements. They require calculations for portions of the building that are not IRC compliant. So there were some shear walls that needed to be calced out. But they and so his designer couldn't do it. So he was on the search now for an engineer that had the capacity. The other one was the owner had a garage wall, the Chad Vila residence, but he had a garage shear wall that the designer put in the middle of his, in the front of his garage opening and obstructing it. And he was looking for some other solutions, but then in review of his drawings, there was a lot more issues.
Mr. Ritchie, this is Sheena. I know we've been corresponding and you've been providing updates. Can you just let the board know a little bit as you talk to the local government officials on Maui? So I know you had a meeting with the Maui mayor, if I'm remembering correctly, and then county planning and permitting officials as well. Could you talk a little bit about what their response was when you presented this information to them?
In regards to permitting officials, basically they said it came down that the ordinance is in place and legislation would be required to modify it. The definition and then with regards to the mayors, I met with Rick Bisson, Jordan Molina, head of DSA, head of recovery, John Smith, and the director. My name, I'm sorry, I don't remember his name. But they listened to my testimony. I showed them all these examples, which I've submitted to you folks, as well as a written letter summarizing the concern, and that's all that was discussed. And then I was excused, and they remained to talk about this issue further behind closed doors. so I'm not privy to what happened. I have followed up with 4-Leaf since that meeting. They said that they're working closely with Wade Shimo Kobura and Lance Nakamura, also with DSA under Jordan Molina. And they're looking, but they're starting to implement some additional line items that 4-Leaf can report or call out to professionals. However, that's 4-Leaf. It's only solely pertains to Lahaina and the rebuild. However, our main county permitting review agency did not have any of these standards as imposed like 4-Leaf. So the balance of the county, is not required for calculations and such. And so we have people out here, we call them seals on wheels. They have drafters that do stuff and depict stuff, and these guys stamp it and it goes through county and it goes out that way. And they're, again, unsound designs. And I understand, again, you guys are just looking for us to report them, but we're not privy to everybody.
So this is Kevin Katayama, the chair. So have you guys reported, like how Sheena had mentioned to Mr. Ono about reporting it to RICO? Because they have the investigative power to determine if the person is doing work out of scope and out of practice, out of their area of expertise.
Yeah, I understand that. It's just difficult to enforce. I talked to insurance, Karen Hong with Atlas. She said she doesn't know. She's been here for years, and she says, yeah, just people are afraid to report small island, and they're not. They don't understand too. You just want to stay out of trouble. I mean, typically architects, engineers are non-confrontational people. So they don't, but they don't understand if they report to RICO, it's anonymous. However, I feel strongly that, it's, ethically that being aware of such designs and of such professionals and not reporting them inherently makes you complicit to their so. I mean,
Okay.
several ethics classes in Virginia Tech.
Yeah, we'll take your item under consideration. But as far as the board goes and enforcing, like how Ms. Choi had explained, it's a RICO determination. So they are our investigative arm. So if you or the county have concerns about an individual, you can report them to RICO and they'll do the investigating. And eventually, if it comes to a violation, then it'll come back to the board for our determination for that individual.
Right. I had suggested to Sheena that, maybe the board submits, has more correspondence with their licensees, submitting, semi-annual, annual letters out to remind professionals of the expectations, what the stamp represents, and rules and regulations, even including, if you do see a set of plans to report, et cetera, so that'd probably be beneficial on your guys' side.
Yeah, so Mr. Ritchie, I just wanted to clarify to Kevin's point. So it's not that the board is trying to, quote unquote, pass the buck on investigating, but just because of the authority that's been given to the board by the state, they can't investigate. And so and I had sent you, several sections in the board's laws and rules on misconduct in the practice, gross negligence, all of those things. So, if it is reported and we understand Hawaii is a small community, but if it doesn't get reported, then RICO can't take action, but RICO would have recourse to find as they investigate in our laws and rules, just, based on statute. So if they do find something, they can refer it to the board and then the board can take action against the licensees. But I do think it's a good idea. The board can consider probably just because of costs, we couldn't send out like a mailer, but I know that the board has a very old consumer brochure that's on our website that could use some update. So perhaps we can put together a committee to work on that. And that might be one way that, we can keep the public informed, at least on the board side. And that can also include some information on RICO, link them to RICO resources so that people are aware of when you report, this is what it looks like, so that they can, weigh those as they spot maybe bad actors in the community.
Yeah, I mean, that'd be great. And then I was gonna say, even just, helping private citizens understand how to vet, these certain individuals. And then I was gonna say clarification of the definitions too. I mean, make them they're broad language right now. It doesn't really explicitly state the limits on an architect from what me and Sheena were reading. I think it should be clarified that specifically in there for architects not to be designing buildings that an SE2 should be handling. But we still have problems with SE2s too. I've seen mainlanders are mainly the culprit, but they submit drawings. Even just last year, I saw a project and another project 2 years ago with no uplift force resisting system. I mean, I did my due diligence and reported, notified that particular individual and they rectified the situation. But I mean, that's just because I caught it. There's so many more that might be out there. And then, and it's just our ethical responsibility and lawful. I mean, it's a lawful duty by these professionals to practice in accordance with adherence with the codes. But I just wanted to apprise you folks, there's licensees that have been awarded licenses that are not doing it right. So.
Okay,
Whatever
thank you,
assistance
Mr.
you
Ritchie.
guys can provide, that would be great.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Ritchie.
Okay.
The board will take this under advisement.
Okay, thank you for everybody. Thank you.
Thank you.
Aloha.
So moving on to agenda item number 4, 2025 legislative session.
And if I could just add one more comment, just for the board's FYI, if you remember at several of the annual meetings from last year, there were sessions about overlapping practice issues. So I understand that all of the organizations have gotten together and they have a overlapping practice task force and they're developing a tool to help boards navigate those gray areas. So I'll make sure to keep you guys updated as that task force updates the state boards, and perhaps we can use some of those considerations as we take Mr. Ritchie's comments into advice. But on the next agenda item, so bills. Happy New Year. We are right in the middle of the legislative session. Opening day was January 15, 2025. And since then, a slew of bills have been introduced. The ones that are being considered have been assigned to their appropriate committees. So as a legislative refresher, they're assigned between 1 to 3 different committees. And each bill has until March 6th to be heard by and pass through all of their assigned committees. if they make it through and they're passed, it goes into the next step, which is the crossover. So bills in the House will cross over to the Senate and vice versa, and they'll be heard by their, I guess, like sister committees in the other side of the legislature. But we're still in the first part. So I'm going to just provide some summaries on bills for your attention. There are 3 that I believe require the board's position on in some form. So especially for our newer members for bills, the board can take has 4 options for bills. So you can either vote after discussion to support the bill, oppose the bill, appreciate the intent of the bill and provide comments. That's more of a neutral one, just if the board has notes that they would like to bring to light on the bill. And then the 4th one is to advise me to track it. That's not a position. And those are usually for bills that historically they're related to the board in terms of industry, but not directly related to licensure. So the board usually does not weigh in on those and it's not necessary, but I track it for you throughout the legislative process and I'll provide a report at the end so you know how those bills played out. So the first one, and then I'm gonna take it a little bit out of order. There was a legislative chart that was attached to the agenda, but we're gonna start with SB 1625, and this is the one that's relating to landscape architects. So the description and purpose statement is that it adopts a uniform standard for landscape architect licensure developed by the Council of Landscape Architectural Registration Boards, or CLARB, which is the national organization which administers the LARE, which is the Landscape Architect Licensure exams. So for your information, this bill proposes to amend your existing HRS in section 468-8. And that's the section specific to landscape architects. Oh, sorry, 464-8D, striking the details of the requirements for education, exam, and experience for landscape architect licensure. And it adds 2 new subsections that create general pathways to landscape architect licensure via endorsement and via exam, which are the 2 existing pathways to licensure for all of your license types. So I did want to provide, and I know that we have Matt Miller from CLARB and Zach Druga from CLARB as well. So Johnny, you can bring them on, and while you're bringing them on, just wanted to add a few more details. So this would require that the details for the landscape architect license, the qualifications and requirements to be amended or added to HAR 16-115. Via a rules revision. So the purpose statement for this bill is a little incorrect in that the language of the bill and what it actually does is it just removes the requirements from the HRS and places the burden of defining them all in the HAR, but it does not actually adopt the uniform standard. That adoption would need to take place if this bill is passed as written. It would need to take place as a rules revision. So there's some additional information that was provided by CLARB. It was in a clipped handout that was on your board seat. So it has several items. So on the top, I just put the top one on the side, and I'll explain it in just a second. But the 3 additional ones is one back and forth page by CLARB describing the uniform licensure standard in 4 sections. There's also a chart that kind of lays out the uniform standard in comparison to Hawaii and the current differences. So that looks like this. The first page looked like this, it has CLARB. And then the last thing provided by CLARB is this marked up colorful multiple page document. And this was provided by their legislative advocacy group. And it just provides different options for the board to consider in revising both the HRS and the HAR to align with the uniform standard. So those are the 3 items provided by CLARB. And then I just did a brief rundown based on what was provided in the colorful markup. I provided you with this just confidentially for your review, which is my comparison of the uniform standard with Hawaii's current laws and rules. So those are 4 items for your consideration. However, for the purposes of the discussion, we can maybe hold discussion on the uniform standard itself until later, because that would be in the rules revision. But the purpose of the bill, what the bill actually does is to take out the rules and requirements from the laws and place them in the bills. So today you would be deciding if the board would like, what position the board would like to take on just that. But the implications later down the line, if that were to be done, is if after the bill, if it were to be passed, and you did want to align with the CLARB uniform standard, I do believe that there's further discussions that the board would need to have, because there's some significant changes that would have to be made to the laws and rules. And while this is landscape architect specific, because we are a multidisciplinary board, what one profession does affect the others. And it's important to take that into consideration. So Johnny, can we bring Matt and Zach? Can you promote them to panelists, please?
Okay.
Okay. Thank you. Hi, Matt and Zach. I know you're representing CLARB. Welcome to today's meeting. Just for the board's FYI, Joel is recusing himself from this discussion because he was involved in some of the things with the bill. But Matt and Zach are representing CLARB, which again is the National Landscape Architect Association. Welcome.
Hi, Sheena. Thank you. Aloha, everyone. I'm Matt Miller. I'm the Chief Executive Officer at CLARB, and I'd be remiss if I also didn't mention that Joel is serving as the president of CLARB this year, and it's been a pleasure to work with him. I know he's recusing himself from the discussion, but I did want to point that out because we get to talk quite a bit. I'm going to share just a little bit about our perspective on, and I know you're not talking about the uniform standards specifically, Sheena. I appreciate that, and thank you for the clarification about the bill too. For us at CLARB, we see this bill as SB 1625 is the first step in hopefully achieving an alignment with the CLARB uniform standard. As Sheena already explained, it does kind of move the requirements from statute and gives the board greater authority to make those changes if you see fit in your rules and your regulations. So for us, it's something that we support pretty strongly. It does not adopt the uniform standard, but it does allow you to have those conversations as a board later and make the adjustments if you see fit. One of the things that we will talk about, and Zach will talk a little bit more specifically too, is the benefits of if you get to that point and do adopt the uniform standard. It will really help to have a system and a structure for you to allow the board to make those changes and be able to do that at your purview, because you are more informed and much closer to regulation than those that are putting the statutes together. Something else I'd talk about quickly is that part of the uniform standard has what we refer to as multiple pathways, which is taking into consideration the diverse way that people not only acquire knowledge, but also demonstrate it. And we feel that that's important to have a robust profession that is still meets a minimum standard for the safe practice of landscape architecture to protect the public's health, safety, and welfare. Something else to mention is that we at CLARB certainly support the implementation of jurisdictional exams like Hawaii's. We think it's important that those are administered, and that does not have any implication for what we suggest or what we're putting forth for any kind of uniformity. The uniform standard also reduces administrative burdens for the board, and it will provide some clarity for applicants, especially for those that are seeking reciprocity in different jurisdictions. We've had 7 jurisdictions already adopt the uniform standard in the last 18 months. We have another 5, I believe, Zach will probably correct me, that are introducing legislation, including hopefully Hawaii in this session. So we're hoping that by the end of this session, we can get that into double digits, and with the goal of getting all of our member boards aligned to a common standard so that we have equity and we have fairness of practice and we have multiple pathways and greater mobility of practice for everyone involved. So with that, I'm going to just sum it up by saying this is a really exciting time for us to have the opportunity to hopefully make this adjustment with Hawaii. We know that, again, this is not happening at this moment. You're only discussing the ability to do that in the rules with SB 1625. So if I might, I'd like to ask Zach to share a little bit more on the procedural aspects of the legislation, and we can both stay on to answer any questions you might have. So Zach, would you mind?
Thanks, Matt, and nice to see everyone again on the board call today. So just to add a little additional detail on some of the key changes that this legislation will ultimately allow the board to enact. As Sheena and Matt have said, this is step one. This is simplifying the statutory language for licensing landscape architects. Additional detail will be put in the regulations after going through the appropriate process there. So one thing or one difference right now between Hawaii and CLARB's uniform standard, Hawaii treats it a little differently if you have an accredited master's degree versus if you have an accredited undergraduate degree. So 3 years if you have an undergraduate accredited degree in landscape architecture, or 2 years if you have a master's. The CLARB uniform standard, it just requires 2 years of experience for the accredited degree pathway, regardless if it's undergraduate or graduate. If it's accredited by LAB, LAAC, or the international equivalent, the CLARB uniform standard recommends 2 years of experience. And then similarly, Hawaii currently for landscape architects is based on a total of 12 years of experience for licensure, which is one of the highest we see currently throughout CLARB's membership. CLARB's uniform standard is based on a total of 8 years of experience. And again, I'm happy to share any kind of past slides or previous materials that I've presented to the board or shared in the past. But hopefully this is, just a little bit of a refresher and not too new to any of the board members. As a member of CLARB, the board did vote in favor during a membership vote for the uniform standard in 2022. So this has been going, an ongoing discussion at the board level. But again, just wanted to provide you all with an update as to what these changes are. So those are some of the two key ones: 2 years across the board for accredited degree based on a total of 8 years of experience. And then there's also additional detail that will be going into the regulations for if an applicant has a non-accredited degree in landscape architecture, if an applicant has education outside of landscape architecture, if they have an associate's degree. So again, it has clear pathways, for whatever an applicant's background is, whatever their education level has been, they can, obtain some credit towards their licensure there. And then again, this is supported by the profession. The bill has been introduced and assigned to committee. We don't see a hearing date yet set, but we will have members of the Hawaii chapter of ASLA, the American Society of Landscape Architects, that will provide testimony in support of the bill. So CLARB and ASLA National will work with the chapter to continue supporting this legislation throughout the process. But again, we just wanted to update the board since this has been introduced and it does impact licensing requirements for one of the professions on the board. But again, we just wanted to update you on who is supporting this bill. And again, just making sure you're aware of, again, what the changes will look like as your regulations are updated after successful passage of this legislation. So you will see that detail around, years of experience for the multiple pathways that, again, will include an accredited degree, a non-accredited degree in landscape architecture, education outside of landscape architecture, or an experience-only pathway. Hawaii currently does offer multiple pathways to licensure. So again, this will be adjusting years of experience for a couple of pathways, as well as adding clarity for some of the different education pathways. So again, we've enjoyed our conversations we've had with the board in the past. We appreciate your positive vote as a CLARB member in 2022. And we look forward to supporting this legislation and keeping the board updated as it moves through the legislative process.
Thank you, Matt. Is there any other public testimony? Johnny?
Thank you, Chair. We do not have anyone requesting to provide testimony.
Okay, any questions, comments from the board?
Only allow, so I have more of a general question, specifically for this bill. I guess from a legal perspective, what are the pros and cons between having the requirements in HRS versus HAR?
We did look into this, and Chris, feel free to jump in as well. There's not necessarily any pros and cons. Usually licensure requirements for our other, the other 52 or so licensing boards and programs in our professional and vocational licensing division, generally they do put most of the requirements in the HRS, since generally the purpose of the HAR is to clarify what's already in the HRS. But in discussion, there didn't seem to be necessarily any pros and cons, though it is nice to have it in both in some form, just in case there's any challenges to licensure application decisions by the board.
So it's in the HAR, does it provide more flexibility to make changes?
It would provide more flexibility for the board to make changes. So just as a reminder, changes to your HRS or the statute or the law, that all needs to go through legislation. So the board can't make any changes to your HRS 464 unless it comes from the state legislature. The HAR, we're currently in a rules revision process. So the board does have the authority to make those clarifying changes in the HAR. And then again, sorry, I know I spoke a lot in the beginning. What this bill does is it takes out the details of the requirements in the HRS and essentially does give greater authority to the board to determine the requirements for landscape architect licensure. I did provide the information on the CLARB uniform standard though, because although this is not what the bill is doing, if the bill passes and if the board does want to move in that direction, I'm assuming that it would require a lot of board discussion just because of some of the changes that would need to be made.
I mean, for me, I guess I need to think about a little more between the move for this particular bill. I do have concerns about the actual content if this moves forward. Because, with the, on the engineering side of the house, I believe our current position is we don't necessarily support the uniform standard that is put up by NCS for engineers and surveyors. And being a multidisciplinary board, I guess we need to think about the impact for that.
Yeah, so does that affect all of us then, if we're gonna adopt this for landscape?
It doesn't, but it might, as your professional organizations look at the change, it might trigger, I don't know, action in the community. So perhaps if the board or if this bill does pass, then the other associations might then lobby because the board doesn't lobby, right? The associations could lobby the legislature to do something similar, which would not necessarily be requiring the uniform standard, but it would do the same thing where it would move the requirements from the law to the administrative rules. And then from there, you would have to decide if you would want to adopt it or not.
I have a question.
I just want to clarify what you said earlier. So the HRS was originally written with some of these requirements in the bill. And then the rules that govern the board, they clarified them and made them more specific. So
The HRS, everything in the HRS 464, that's written by the legislators. And that's like kind of the governing.
a big umbrella.
Mhm. And then your HAR 16-115, it clarifies certain things. So for example, if you look in your laws and rules in 464, so we go to the section that this bill proposes to amend, it's 464 dash 3, which starts, no person shall be eligible for licensure as a professional landscape architect unless, and then it goes 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So this is the current laws that govern the licensure. And then let's see. Where it says, for example, in D1, towards the end, shall require that the holder successfully pass a national landscape architect licensing exam and a written examination prescribed by the board designed to test the holder's knowledge of the state's climatic vision board. That's the part that mandates a state exam, and then the rules clarify what's in the state, for example. Or it says, D2, the person is a holder of a master's degree in landscape architecture from an institution of higher education approved by the board. So that's what's in your HRS, and then the laws clarify what does it mean to have a degree approved by the board, and what are acceptable degrees. So it's like broad, and then the rules clarify.
So is it better to have both? Broad and.
I can't say if it's better, but it's currently status quo across all the licensing boards that generally it's in both.
Yeah, sorry, this is Tony. At least for professional organizations I'm involved with, you also have your constitution and your bylaws. So you have the more broad thing in the constitution, and I think they're more well-defined in bylaws. It could be even further clarified in my organization. We have a set of rules that are a lot more easily editable. Not the process is not slow.
And it doesn't necessarily take it out in the bill, but if you look at, the actual, I gave you a copy of the actual bill language. So on page 2, starting at line 15, talks about the amendment. Sorry, this is the wrong one. Where it mentions the amendment, it does keep it in there generally as that there has to be laws and rules around landscape architecture. But it makes it much more general and that it amends it to 1, the person satisfies the requirements for licensure by endorsement prescribed by the board, or 2, the person is a holder of a degree in landscape architecture from a school or college approved by the board and is satisfied the examination and lawful experience requirements prescribed by the board. So that would be your via exam pathway. And both of those pathways are currently clarified in the rules. So there's sections applying via endorsement and then applying via exam. So for example, this it takes out in the statute the requirement for a state exam, though that requirement is also the rules. So it would remain the same unless you wish to. But it gives, so we use the state exam as an example, gives the board discretion to require or not require a state exam versus right now, because it's required in the law, you have to have a state exam. But you can clarify the details of the state exam and the rules.
About the pathway for non-graduates.
Actually, I guess in the way that the bill is currently written, it's not clear if this still includes the pathway for no degree licensure, so that's actually a comment that the board could make. That's not, that language could be clearer in the bill. And if the bill is passed as is, then the board would have to clarify in the rules. The board would have to clarify that in the rules that holder of a degree, and that's actually, the board should probably comment that it's not. And that the intention is to keep the no degree pathway, which is in the uniform standard, then we can say, I can help work on language that makes that clearer.
Does the bill have to say in the beginning, section 1, that we're gonna adopt the Council of Landscape Architecture boards like the national thing, since the engineers or architects may have a difference of opinion in adopting their national standards? And in the other portions or the next with our rules where the board can set the rules, can we like judge that we want to accept these national standards and that those are national standards and we just adopt them in the second portion? And then, because what if in the future, 20 years from now, CLARB changes the rules again, which don't necessarily adopt well to the way things are from Hawaii. Right, so if it's in this bill, does that mean that we have to consistently follow that?
That's a really good question. So section 1 of the bill, it's called the preamble. So that just provides context for the bill. I would recommend that the board provides comments clarifying to the bill, the committees that the bill's heard in, that what the bill actually proposes is not actually what's in the preamble, because I do think that it's confusing, because the preamble suggests that the bill adopts it when it doesn't. So I do think I would recommend that you provide that comment. However, the bill, my understanding is that the bill is still legal, because what governs, and Chris, again, please feel free to jump in. What governs what can be discussed as the content of the bill is the bill's title, and the bill's title is relating to landscape architects. So it still falls legally within what's allowable for the content of the bill. But yes, I think it does need to be clarified. And then if something like this bill were to be passed, and then the board would then want to discuss adoption of the uniform standard in rules, it probably would be best to adopt the language of the standard and not the standard outright. So that, as you mentioned, it addresses should the standard change in a way that is not conducive to Hawaii's licensure population, that could be more flexible.
I'm Deputy Attorney General Christopher Hahn here, just to piggyback off of what Sheena was saying. So I'm gonna work backwards. With regards to section 1, at the end of the day, it is just a preamble. It doesn't impose any requirements. So as Sheena has recommended, if you're not necessarily comfortable with the language, you are always free to suggest to the legislature and request that the committee make amendments. With regards to Kevin's question about is there a pathway? The way I read the new language, section 1, not section 1, subsection 1 on page 6, the person satisfies the requirements for licensure by endorsement. Endorsement prescribed by the board. Essentially, the way I read it is it's up for the board to decide. So
But endorsement is, it's two different
things.
Either to get your license via exam or endorsement, which is somebody who comes from a different jurisdiction who's already licensed, they can apply.
Yeah, so I think
There's no mention right now about somebody who's working in the industry for 12 years or say, they don't, right now, the language of this bill, it doesn't give them an opportunity to pursue pathway to licensure.
And that's something that will be clarified in the regulations. There will be a pathway. If they don't have any post-secondary education, they would need a total of 8 years of experience compared to the current 12.
Yeah, and I think that can be clarified in the rules, but as the bill is written, I agree with Kevin that it doesn't provide for that. So if that's the intent, which I think is the intent to align with the uniform standard, at least based on the bill, then I can help provide a correction that would include, it would probably be the person is the holder of a degree in landscape architecture, or I have to work on the language, but to make sure it's inclusive of a no degree pathway to licensure, which is already allowed in the current statute in subsection 5. So, so it would have to be something like that where it just mentions that they meet the experience requirement for initial licensure and has passed the appropriate exams, something like that.
Yeah, a new section would probably be.
Have any questions? I do, while we have Matt and Zach on the call, I know that, again, this bill is not adopting the uniform standard, but while we have you on the call, I did have some questions. Sorry, I have too many papers. So I know we've been mentioning the state exam, and I wanted to know, are jurisdictions, if they want to adopt the uniform standard, are they allowed to adopt it and then add to it to make it state specific? I know that a little bit defeats the purpose of a uniform standard, but imagine the state exam is very important to Hawaii, and then also our surveyors have a state exam as well. So I wanted to clarify that.
Thanks, Sheena. That's important, and that's something 7 or 8 of the member jurisdictions of CLARB have jurisdictional exams. We are intentionally silent on that in the standard because we feel that that is at the purview of the member board, and so that's something that we're supportive of, having additional filtering or examinations to demonstrate local knowledge. That's something that actually several of those that have adopted still have in place, and it's not in any way, shape, or form excluding that or ruling that out.
Absolutely. And again, I know it's a multidisciplinary board, but this is, again, just addressing landscape architect requirements. The land surveying jurisdictional exam, that would be a separate conversation with NCES and the appropriate folks. This bill and what we're trying to set up the board to be allowed to adopt is just coming from the landscape architect community, looking to amend our licensure requirements for landscape architecture. Anything relating to engineering, surveying, or architecture, those are separate discussions with NCARB or NCES or those appropriate stakeholders. Again, this is just for landscape architecture, and the board is more than welcome to keep that state-specific exam. Because we know we have members, in some unique environments and parts of the country that do need to supplement the LARE. California has their seismic engineering, Alaska their Arctic engineering and things. So we do understand there are some unique circumstances throughout our membership that they need to supplement their exam requirements.
And Sheena, if I might just add one more element of this is our uniform standard. We have a credential that's called CLARB certification. We have aligned CLARB certification to the uniform standard. So fundamentally, when someone can demonstrate that they have CLARB certification, they're demonstrating that they've met that existing standard. That's really important for us as more states adopt. That certification can be a symbol and an indicator that someone has already met a standard from one state to another. NCARB has the NCARB certificate that does this really well. That's something that we're hoping as we get broader adoption of the uniform standard, that the CLARB certification, which is now more verifying information, we're actually showing that they've met a certain level of practice and the standard. I bring that up. It's really important because we are also working with other countries that are interested in identifying equivalencies between our systems. And it is the CLARB certification standard and the uniform standard that we'll be comparing and measuring that to. So for example, right now we have formed a working agreement with the Philippines, and we are trying to evaluate our systems. We can't evaluate 56 systems at once, and so we are using the CLARB uniform standard as the metric that we will compare with the Philippines. And so that CLARB certification and our uniform standard is something that will also help with mobility at some point in the future down the road. You can be assured that we're looking at that through that filter as someone might want to practice in the Philippines or vice versa. that's just one example of how this uniformity could also help us create greater mobility, not just throughout North America, but throughout the Pacific and other places as well.
Okay, yeah, thank you for clarifying. So just as a follow-up question, so if states can, still maintain the authority to add things as necessary, such as the state exam, what exactly does the uniform standard mean that a state or a jurisdiction has adopted? Is it primarily aligning with the education pathways to licensure? I think I'm a little confused because I was referring to the suggested markups that was provided to different options for the HRS or HAR revision. And like in that, the state exam requirement was struck and things. So I'm trying to just grasp what the uniform standard, what would be required of the board's laws and rules if the uniform standard were adopted.
Sure. So what's required for uniform standard adoption would be aligning the different pathways and years of experience. The LARE is always required for a pathway. So it would be aligning their years of experience for the accredited degree, a non-accredited degree, education outside of landscape architecture. And then again, if they don't have any qualifying post-secondary education, there is an experience-only pathway in the uniform standard. So again, whatever an applicant's background is, there is a pathway for them to obtain licensure through CLARB's model requirements. And as Matt was addressing, we have 56 members who have all had different licensure requirements. So this is a big effort from CLARB to align our licensing requirements throughout our membership. Again, providing clarity for boards and the applicants, as well as improving mobility for the profession with having everybody, licensed under the same requirements. So as Matt mentioned, we've got 7 and we're working on about another 5 this year so far since this was approved in 2022. So we're continuing to make progress towards unifying our licensure requirements. So again, this would be the first step for the Hawaii board to move in this direction, again, for landscape architecture requirements.
I know I'm supposed to recuse myself, but I just want to provide a clarification. You're referring to the that marked up, the edited version. The reason why the Hawaii license was struck out, when CLARB was asked to take a look at it, it was only to specifically look at alignment with the uniform standard, not the state, other state requirements. And so that's why it was struck out, but it wasn't meant to be, that's what CLARB is recommending.
Okay, thank you. And then I have some other questions about the uniform standard, but maybe we can save that for a separate discussion.
Another question. Understanding the processor, we can remind us. So if we were to move things into the rules, while we can make proposed edits to the rules, other outside entities can also make proposed revisions to rules. Is that correct?
What do you mean by proposed edit? So during the rules revision process, which the board's currently in, we're in like the very baby stages, right? So ultimately it's the board who will take a vote on what to amend in the rules. But as a part of the rules revision process, the board engages different stakeholders who provide testimony and input on rules revisions. Yeah.
So is that something that's exclusive to us to make potential revisions to the rules, or can another entity in the public propose rules?
So only the board can vote and make those rules changes, but everyone from the public can contribute to ideas and public testimony, comment, input, but ultimately what the board votes on is what would go through the administrative rules process. And the board has to justify all of the rules changes, so they can't be arbitrary, and there's a justification process, but yeah, ultimately it would be the board's decision for what's in the rules.
But I can see, like with things that are required in the statutes, it's a lot more extensive to make those types of changes. And of course, we would want to include, of course, the critical things into statutes and moving things to rules that allows a little more flexibility on the process to make provisions. See that being a benefit, as long as nobody else can propose, enact changes without our consideration.
As it stands now, the board cannot make rules. Right, because the details of licensure for all of our disciplines are in the HRS. All we can do is make clarifications, basically. And yet, the rule, the HRS in 464-7 powers and duties of the board, we are granted the authority to make rules. But we can't.
Another question. So on page 5 or page 6, they have the 1 and 2 that Kevin clarified that there was not a minimum years experience without an education. So would the clarification be like 11.3 for minimum years experience, and then also 11.4 for something written in there with state exam? And this bill is kind of a bigger umbrella.
Yeah, so if you really want to keep the state exam there and yeah, you could add, just to make it very, very clear in statute and rule. So, if you did want to, we could also add a line item to for the state exam. And then, yes, I would add additional language that would probably mirror something like if you flip the page, what's crossed out from 5 at the bottom of page 5, the person has had 12 years of full-time experience in architecture work of that section is your current no degree pathway for licensure. So I would probably take language from that and add it as a suggestion by the board to make sure that that pathway is still included.
Okay, so what we're currently saying is that item 1, 2, 3, and 4 will act as the umbrella in this bill. And then the rules clarification, we would choose or not to choose, whatever, the CLARB uniform standard specifics.
Yeah.
And then in our rule specifics also, we would repeat the state exam and clarifications on that.
So it was, yeah, are there any other questions?
Question, comment? So are we providing a motion for this board to approve, deny, or appreciate?
So you can
Okay.
support the bill,
Deny.
oppose the bill, appreciate the intent of the bill and offer comments, and I need you to provide a position, so you can't just track it.
Based on the current, how it's written now, or the discussions that we've had to modify it?
It can be, you can do any of those 3, and I can still include what you said. So it sounds like just because there's some changes to be proposed, and maybe I don't know if there's hesitancy, and sounds like there would need to be further discussion on what of the CLARB uniform standard you would like to adopt. I don't know if you want to appreciate the intent of it and then offer comments. The comments that I've heard you make would be to clarify the purpose of the bill in the preamble. Just to clarify that it's not adopting the CLARB uniform standard, that would need to be done in the road revision. And then adding the state exam requirement back into the proposed language, as well as the no degree pathway.
Or some other wording that says,
That allows.
as the board allows, or something that
And
creates the opportunity to put that in the, right? Because right now there's zero opportunity for that. Unless you add something that says, alternative pathways as allowed by the board or something like that. Right?
Would you want a motion to appreciate the intent of the bill?
That's up to you. It sounds like that's the direction the board is leaning.
Make a motion to appreciate the intent of the bill with whatever the verbiage is with
So just to make sure I heard correctly, so if you appreciate the intent of the bill and offer comments, the comments is to clarify in the preamble, the purpose of the bill. That is not adopting the CLARB uniform standard and that would need to be adopted in the rules. Adding language that would allow for the multiple pathways, including the no degree. And then adding the requirement back in for the state exam so that remains there.
yeah, that's the motion.
So the motion is to appreciate.
Appreciate the bill with
I second.
the commentary.
Clarification.
Seconds.
Okay, so
Any nays, recusals, or abstentions?
I'm recusing myself.
Joe Kurko is recusing himself.
I can recuse myself too, because I was involved in the uniform standard thing, not this bill, but the uniform standard, but I'll recuse myself, because everything you said is good with me. I'll recuse myself.
All those in favor, say aye. No nays, so I asked for nays first, so nobody said nays. Everybody said aye. Okay, motion carries.
thank
Next,
you, Matt and Jack.
Thank you, everyone, for your time. We appreciate it.
Thanks, Sheena. Thanks, everyone, for a great discussion.
Thanks. So sorry, just one more thing before we move on. So this bill is scheduled, it's not yet scheduled, so I'll continue to watch for when it's scheduled and I'll submit written testimony on behalf of the board. Appreciating the intent of and offering the comments that we noted. And then at our next meeting, I'll keep you updated as to how the bill's progressing.
Well, does she, or does the senator,
Moriwaki.
was there be an amendment to the bill? And before she would actually,
So the bill, as it's currently written, is what, once it gets scheduled, is what would be heard by the committee. And then I would present the board's suggested amendments. And then it's up to the whole committee to vote whether or not they take the amendments in full, in part, or not at all. So it is
the bill
possible.
could be passed
The
the
bill
way
could
that
be
it is.
passed the way that it is, correct?
It's actually stronger to oppose
if we want to make changes.
if we want these changes to be implemented, it would be stronger to oppose it.
It would be, but it's,
I mean, it's the way that it is the way that it is. I'm just understanding.
yeah.
I'm just understanding. I'm sorry, I'm new.
Just for bills in general, it is stronger if you take a position in support or opposition. And in the past, when the board has had serious concerns with the bill, they have opposed.
I see.
It sounded like the board was unsure, which is, I think, why you chose to appreciate the intent of and then offer the comments.
Yeah.
And usually when it's a bill that's very specific to changing specific licensure requirements, usually if it's non-controversial, the committee will defer to the expertise of the licensing boards, but we have seen in the past where the bill became a little bit more political and then that's when it might warrant the board taking a stronger position if it wanted its voice to be heard stronger.
Yeah.
Can I ask, what is your position on this bill?
But to be honest, I didn't know,
Yeah.
Can I say?
Yeah.
Can I just say that, even with the flaws in the bill, it basically changes nothing on the current requirements. Because it's all in the rules. The HRS. The current requirements that we have stated in the HRS
is in the HA part. So this bill doesn't change any of it. What it does allow the board to do is to make changes to the rules if it so chooses to.
You can't do that already. Make changes to the rules.
You cannot. Because it's in
You
the.
cannot violate what the HRS is saying. But right now, for instance,
You not change the HRS.
yeah, you can't change our HRS, but you can
Which you are.
clarify or to what the HRS is saying.
You can clarify, but you cannot change it. So all the details,
So right now, you cannot add the no education pathway
it's
because it's not stated inside the law,
Right,
right?
right.
Right. You can't add a provision unless you put something like up to the discretion of the board or some other means that allows us to write the rules to provide that pathway. Which, that's how the engineers are and the architects are.
No, but it says right here, always current. It says board has discretion for the requirements of exam, education. That should, I mean, it's only that. That's it. I mean, whoever did this,
So that's,
oh,
yeah.
so it's already there.
So if we, oh, you guys are confusing me. So my understanding is that we cannot change the rules. So let's just take one item. Right now, you have to have 12 years experience under a licensed landscape architect in order to sit for the test and get licensed.
if you have no education.
If you have no education. So for that one line item, if for the rules, this board decides, well, because of the way the profession is and because of standards that are changing across the country, we, the board, think that that 12 years should be reduced to 8 years to allow people to get
You
licensed.
can't do that.
You can do that.
You cannot do
You
that.
cannot do that.
Correct.
Not
Because
correct.
it's in this way.
Because the statute's explicit that it's 12 years, it has to be 12 years.
So what could the board change? The way that it's currently written?
The board could change, for example, which accrediting bodies would be acceptable. So like the uniform standard proposes adding the Canadian, the LAAC. So right now, it's in the laws, it's a school or program approved by the board. And then the laws define school or program approved by the board as allowed. So the board could change that definition to add LAAC accredited, which would allow for the acceptance of Canadian degrees. But in terms of the number of years required for each experience pathway, currently those are set. And those are set because they're in statute.
That's why we're appreciating the intent of the bill, but we wanted to add the other sentences in there to create us an opportunity to change for 12 to 8, right?
Right, right.
So there's no intent to change the HRS to make it more vague, to fall back on the rules, right?
I don't know what, I don't think that's the intent of the bill. Maybe some legislators might see it that way, because this does give more authority to the board to determine the requirements, but I don't know how the legislators will view the intent.
So if this passes, even with any clarification in the wording, it's mostly just for future kind of potential changes, right? It's not gonna affect any education or years
Yes,
requirements.
so until the rules can be
near
revised.
future.
Yes, until the rules can be revised, which, as I've explained, unfortunately does take a long time. Maybe about a year out, the board would have that time to discuss which of the CLARB uniform standard things they would want to adopt in the rules. Yeah. So because if this bill passed, it's just giving more authority to the board to decide. If it passes like as is or as is with the board's amendments, it would then be on the board to promulgate rules to specify now what are the requirements. And until the revisions can be made, the current rules will remain in effect. And those would be what is now governing, along with the vague or the more general HRS. Sorry, I know it is confusing. Did that clarify?
Yes, it did. Thank you very much.
Does anyone else have any more questions? Okay,
Next bill.
next bill. Okay, these ones will go faster. Okay, the next two can be considered together. They're not so this is HB 124 and SB 1506, both relating to professional land surveyors. They're not companion bills. Companion bills are when there's the exact same bill, but it's introduced in the House and the Senate, so the language is identical. It's not a companion bill. There's one small change, and that's the effective date. So in HB 124, at the very end of the bill, it says it's effective upon approval. While SB 1506 has an effective date of July 1st, 2025. And that's the only difference between the two bills. The substance of the bill is exactly the same. So its purpose, the HB 124, the purpose is establishes a 10-year statute of repose for land surveyors, after which time a complaint or civil action cannot be made. And then the purpose statement for SB 1506 is establishes a statute of repose prohibiting the commencement of civil action against the professional land surveyor. 10 years has elapsed since the latter of the date of completion of a contract or final payment for the land surveying work. Although the purpose statements are the same, what the bill does is exactly the same. The amendments are exactly the same. And if you remember, for those who have been on the board since the last legislative session, a similar bill was introduced. And it was HB 2148 during last year's legislative session. And for the board's testimony then, the board appreciated the intent of it and offered comments. Because at that time, that original bill did appear to narrow the board's ability to protect the health, safety, and welfare of the public by restricting its authority to take action against the licensee based on 436B-22. But in the final, it didn't pass out, which is why its language was reintroduced this year. But right before it passed out, they did amend it to accept the board's suggestions that language be included to say that no civil action would be taken. And the current bills both include that amendment that the board had suggested. So I don't see that there would be any concerns. This would be outside of the board taking action, since the board can still take action for other unlawful action by a surveyor licensee.
Okay, thank you, Sheena. Johnny, any public comments?
Thank you, Chair. We do not have anyone requesting to provide testimony.
Any comments, questions for the board?
No, and that's what those proposers are, mentioning. There's no.
That's easy.
Is there a motion?
Again, you can support, oppose, or appreciate the intent of with comments. This is not directly related to licensure. You might appreciate the intent of and just offer the comments that the current bills as they're written do, did include the language that the board had suggested and had issues with last session. So the board does not appear to have issues this section.
Make a motion to appreciate the content. Okay.
Second?
Second.
Any nays?
Currently, there's no time limit, right?
Currently no time.
Yeah.
We want that for engineers and architects too.
But engineer was 30 years, no?
In the. There's no requirement right now, similar to all the other disciplines. Any nays, recusals, or abstentions? Seeing none, all those in favor say aye. Aye. It carries. Next.
Just to let you know, for SB 1506, it's scheduled for hearing tomorrow. And because there's a 24-hour deadline before the hearing to submit written testimony, I did submit written testimony on the board's behalf. but just said that we're meeting today and we'll be able to provide a position, but last year these were the comments. So tomorrow, when I give oral testimony for the board, I'll mention we talked today and it's what is the written testimony. Okay. Okay, so moving on. So all of the other bills, I'm recommending that you advise me to, or direct me to track it. They're not directly related to licensure, though they're adjacent to your professions in some ways. So this will be SB 74 relating to state construction projects, SB 66 related to housing, SB 232 relating to renewable energy, HB 352 relating to renewable energy, SB 588 relating to renewable energy, SB 701 relating to renewable energy, HB 284 relating to housing, HB 971 relating to state construction projects. You have the purpose statements and the bills in the list, so I'm gonna read them unless you want me to. But we do need a vote if you want me to track it, so I suppose put them all together unless anybody has any.
Are there any questions from the public?
Thank you, Chair. We do not have anyone requesting to provide testimony.
Okay, thank you. Any questions, comments from the board?
So when you're tracking it, and it moves out, I guess there's still a chance to comment, right, when it switches over?
So at each hearing, there's a chance to comment. And in particular, I'm tracking them because some, like the renewable energy bills, this is language that's they've been trying to introduce it for the last 2 years and get it passed. Originally, I think back in 2022, one of the bills had all what's in here and included an amendment to our statute. And in that case, we did provide a comment. And because it would still be under the title for them to add things in as there's amendments, I'm tracking to watch to make sure that nothing is amended to your statute that would then require the board to comment. So a significant change to the substance of the bill happens where it would be good for the board to weigh in. I'll bring that to your attention. If it's between board meetings, I will tap on the legislative liaisons who's appointed to help provide a position on the boards. But generally, we track these. But if there's a bill that you would like to comment on, please let me know. I'm just suggesting that you track them after reading through the bills. But if you would like to take a vote on any one of them in particular and provide a position, we can do so. But usually the board does not provide positions unless it's directly related to licensure, amendments to your statute, or something that really affects the profession in a direct way.
Making a motion that our EO track the bills. This big stack. The balance of the bills.
And second, any nays, recusals, or abstentions? Being none, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Motion carried. Where are we?
We are on applications.
Agenda item number 5, applications. Ratification list. Move to approve the ratification list. Motion,
I move to accept the ratification.
second,
Second.
Dan, second. Any nays, recusals, or abstentions? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Recommendation, agenda item number 5B, recommendations from the following application review committees. Motion to approve the list. Tony moved, second. John, second. Any nays, recusals, or abstention? Being none, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
So we're moving to executive session?
You make the motion.
Oh, yeah.
So
We need to go into executive session. Do I have a motion to go into executive session?
And so moved.
Dan moves second.
Second.
Any recusals or abstentions? All those in favor say aye.
Okay, so the board's moving into executive session in accordance with HRS 92-4 and 92-5A1 and 4 to consider and evaluate personal information relating to individuals applying for licensure and to consult with the board's attorney on questions and issues pertaining to the board's powers, duties, privileges, immunities, and liabilities. The board will vote in open meeting. And I do see that we have an individual who's on the board's agenda, Samuel Flinkstrom. So Samuel, if you can hear us, the board is moving into executive session. When we reach your agenda item, we will move you into a separate room and you're welcome to provide oral testimony to the board. The board has already reviewed your application materials, so you can provide any oral testimony as needed, and then the board may or may not ask you any questions. I don't know, Michael, Ralph, and Tom, are you providing testimony on any of the applications? I guess so.
Samuel will see your thumbs up, so we're good.
Okay. And then Johnny, if you can move us into executive session. Oh, thank you.
Out of? It still says board is currently in executive session on the right.
Courtney, are we in open session?
Yes, Johnny, we're back in now.
Yes.
Johnny, can you remove the slide that says the board's currently in executive session, please? Are we on mute?
Everybody else.
Might have stepped away.
There, okay.
Okay, so we're out of executive session. So we have to do one at a time. So in executive session, we discussed the applications of Kenneth Say, Samuel Flingstrom, and Brian Peterson, architect Jason Mitchell. We vote all at the same time, one at a time. Is there a motion to approve Kenneth Bosquick?
So moved.
Second,
Second. Okay. Right.
any recusals or abstentions? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Is it?
Motion to approve application of Samuel Flingstrom. Tony.
Second. Brian.
Any recusals or abstentions? Seeing none, all those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Is there a motion for Brian Peterson
So moved. Tony.
to approve?
Second.
To approve. Second, Bert. Any nays, recusals, or abstentions? All those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
A motion to approve Jason Mitchell? Is there a motion to approve Jason Mitchell?
I move to approve. Second.
Any recusals or abstentions? All those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Okay, agenda item number 6, executive officers report.
Okay, we'll make this fast. So first, update on ISLA architect licensee audit of continuing education requirements. So as you know, all ISLA licenses need to be renewed by April 30th of every even numbered year. Everybody renewed on time. Good job. The architects are the lucky licensee population. That's the only ones that have a CE requirement. So because of that, they are audited after the renewal period is over. So Courtney and I have been doing the auditing process. 110 licensees were randomly audited. It's generated by our tech department. And so after follow-up, there were 23 who were deemed not compliant with the audit. So what happens when they're not compliant, which means they didn't respond or they had insufficient CEs or not qualifying CEs, they will be reported to RICO because it's statutorily required to meet the CE requirements. And when you turn in your renewal, you are attesting that you've met all the renewal requirements, which again, for the architects requires CEs. So they'll be reported to RICO and RICO will decide whether or not they're going to follow up with an investigation. If they do, and if they're found to be non-compliant, then RICO will refer any disciplinary action recommendations to the board. And at that point, you will see those either settlement agreements or options for the board to take action on the license.
Am I on this?
Did you get
The list is confidential.
Do you want to discuss it in open session?
No, in the past.
In
We
the
gave
past.
them, a chance to.
And we did,
Oh, you
so,
did?
yeah,
Oh.
so there's been multiple reach outs, responses. Some either did not respond, or they were not compliant with the audit. 23 out of 110.
Yeah.
That's so bad.
So it's just to note as an FYI. Okay. Let's see. Okay, the next one, the last thing on the agenda is update on the number of current INFA licensees. So I know sometimes in our discussion, we have questions on how many current licensees are there. So I extracted this from our division releases an annual geographic report of all the PVL boards and programs sorted by license type and island, mainland, foreign geographic residents of the licensees. So this report is also available on the board website. It's current as of September 2024. And this is just the breakdown for the ESO licensees. So you can go to that until the next one comes out later on this year. And that's all.
Thank you, Sheena. Do we have this next meeting? Next meeting, March 6th, special legislative meeting?
So please keep this calendar, March 6th. Again, thank you for having those respective legislative sessions. We canceled the January one, but we may have this March 6th one should anything come up that the board needs to discuss. If we do have it, it will only be on legislative matters. We won't vote on minutes or applications or anything. It's purely on legislative discussion. But I will try and let you know as soon as possible if we go to that meeting and if those meetings can and for those who join us and fly in, we'll let you know as soon as possible. So we can review the flights or if you don't, if that's not fit. And if it's not, then the next meeting will be in April. But please, for now, keep it in your calendars because we do.
Okay, thank you. Meeting is adjourned. 59.
Okay.